Hey, everybody, and welcome to Narativ. This is Heather Honey. You might remember her from the Cyber Ninjas. That's the conspiracy theorist group that spent over 6 months searching Arizona ballots for bamboo fibers and hidden watermarks and some sort of Sharpie pen mystery. They were hunting for fraud that, as we now know, never existed. Their audit came to nothing. Biden won that election, and it turned out that Honey and the Cyber Ninjas were complete frauds.
First this evening, Maricopa County officials unveil a scathing response to the election audit by the Cyber Ninjas.
The county said, "We determined that nearly every finding included faulty analysis, inaccurate claims, misleading conclusions, and a lack of understanding of federal and state election laws."
It's just a lack of independence and objectivity.
The state Senate's contractors, including the Cyber Ninjas, were run largely by supporters of former President Donald Trump.
What did Trump do? In August, Trump appointed Heather Honey as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Election Integrity at the Department of Homeland Security. A month later, Honey held a conference call with election officials from nearly all 50 states. Instead of briefing them on protecting the 2026 midterms, she questioned whether DHS cybersecurity experts had strayed from their mission by combating election misinformation. She accused the Federal Election Security Center of moving into censorship. Election officials left the call alarmed and deeply disturbed. One of them told reporters, "I don't know if she's stupid or lying." That's who Trump put in charge of federal election security. Now, Heather Honey's former boss and mentor is Cleta Mitchell, the lawyer who sat on that infamous call where Trump pressured Georgia officials to find votes. Mitchell now runs the Election Integrity Network, training what investigators call an organized cavalry of activists being embedded across every battleground state as poll watchers and election monitors. Now take a very close listen to what Mitchell is now proposing happens with election laws.
The president's authority is limited. Executive is limited in his role with regard to elections, except that where there is a threat to the national sovereignty of the United States, as I think that we can establish with the porous system that we have, then I think maybe the president is thinking that he will exercise some emergency powers to protect the federal elections going forward.
Trump is going all out on several fronts to steal the next elections. In August, Trump personally called Governor Greg Abbott and ordered Texas to redraw congressional maps mid-decade. The Texas legislature complied, creating 5 new Republican-friendly districts. North Carolina passed their gerrymandered map last week, targeting Congressman Don Davis, one of only 3 black representatives from a state where a third of residents are black. And then this morning, Indiana Governor Mike Braun called a special session for November 3rd, making Indiana the 4th Republican state to pursue Trump's redistricting scheme. Indiana's Republicans already hold 7 of 9 congressional seats, but they want all 9. Wednesday, the Supreme Court hears Louisiana versus Calais, designed to gut Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. If the conservative majority rules as expected, Republicans could eliminate minority majority districts across the South and gain 19 additional House seats, wiping out 30% of the congressional black caucus. Meanwhile, Trump's Justice Department is sending election monitors to California and New Jersey, not to protect voting rights, but to surveil Democratic states holding crucial off-year elections on November 4th. And then there's the voting machines. You'll remember Trump spent years attacking Dominion, forced the company to sue Fox News for defamation. Fox lost that and paid $787 million to settle. In October, Dominion was sold. The buyer, Scott Leyendecker, former Republican elections director in St. Louis, who immediately rebranded the company as Liberty Vote and promised to comply with Trump's executive orders. There's a real conspiracy to steal the 26 elections, and they're not even hiding it. The coup is continuing. It's comprehensive, it's coordinated, and it's designed to ensure Trump controls Congress no matter how America votes. I'm joined as well tonight by Lauren Groh-Wargo, who's the CEO of Fair Fight Action, and also Max Flugrath of Fair Fight Action. Hi, you guys. Welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Great to be here.
Max, a lot of that reporting came from your really incredibly powerful thread that spread around Twitter and X, whatever X is called now, for
Twitter.
I call it Twitter. I can't stop myself. I just can't. This was when you put it all together, I mean, we've all seen the little pieces, but when you sort of put it all together, Boy, it looks like there's a huge conspiracy to steal these elections. Tell us a little bit about that thread, the origin of that thread, and then what do you think is so important about the whole picture of it?
Yeah. Well, it all tracks back to the New York Times investigative report that showed as far back as March, this EIN operative, this election integrity network operative, which you talked a little bit about in the intro, was discussing creating a pretense to declare a national emergency to allow Trump to essentially go around Congress and impose new mandates on states and on localities on how to run their elections. The Constitution is very clear. The president does not have that authority. And one other thing that is really important to drive home to folks is that even in the event of some sort of national emergency being called, there is a very detailed list of powers that a president has during a national emergency, and any authority over how states run their elections is not one of them. And so to go back a little bit to the EIN thing, the Election Integrity Network you mentioned, Cleta Mitchell founded it shortly after her and others failed attempts to overturn the 2020 election. And she's been recruiting activists, kind of pushing model legislation into different states to pass voter suppression laws. And she's been really central to the Trump regime's strategy to make the 2026 election unfair.
Cleta Mitchell has been involved with people like Steve Bannon in the past. She was part of that whole January the 6th insurrection. She's no stranger to this, but it's amazing to me that we've still got the same people doing the same thing again, only here we are in 2026. Lauren, this is ridiculous that we're still in this place, but here we are.
Well, the Republican Party decided under Trump to make voter suppression not a side strategy, but their central strategy. When Trump went into the 2020 election, the RNC under his leadership at that time was, for the first time since the 1980s, freed up from a judicial consent decree that had prohibited the committee from doing voter suppression activities. In the 1980s, they had been so egregious and so racist, they were prevented from doing the Republican version of voter protection, which is intimidating voters and mainly Black voters at the polls. So that was a sea change. And so since 2020 and since the first term, this has gotten pulled into the Project 2025 and pulled into their larger strategy. Obviously, this is not new. This has been going on since the Voting Rights Act was passed. There's been an intentional effort to roll back civil and voting rights. There's been an intentional effort to restrict the right to vote. And now we see it turbocharged. So those characters that you mentioned around Cleta Mitchell and Steve Bannon are now ascendant. They're not just sort of gadflies around the Trump operation. They are central thought leaders driving a strategy. And as you can see in the daily news, from partisan mid-decade gerrymandering, racist gerrymandering we're seeing right now in North Carolina and Indiana, they are driving a no-holds-barred power strategy to try to remake the elections under two big categories. Category number one, try to change voting process. So that's where you see attempts at the federal level to pass bills to try to make you show your papers to register, try to curtail vote by mail. So change processes, try to undermine certification. We've seen that. And then the second on this gerrymandering and gutting of the Voting Rights Act about who counts, right? And that's a fundamental question of our country. Who is a full citizen and who counts? And so they have a whole slew of strategies and tactics under that umbrella, trying to append it and sort of achieve their twin goals of white supremacy and one-party control.
If we look at these 7 points that have been happening, let's start with the gerrymandering, if we could. You got Texas, Missouri, North Carolina, now Indiana joining on. What is the net upside to Republicans if they get all the seats here? Like, how much do they actually gain? And then what is the takeaway? What are we taking away from local residents of these previously more equitable districts that are now going to be represented by people who aren't from that district, and certainly that the Black caucus is going to be fundamentally struck back by almost 30%, we're saying.
That's right. What we're seeing is a power grab dictated by Trump, and there's lots of on-the-record quotes from Republicans in all of these states that they are doing this at the behest of Trump to both gut the political power of people of color and for partisan advantage. And both are really important to talk about when you look at what's happening, and that the most expedient way for them to complete their political project is to gut the political power of Americans of color. And in these states, that's predominantly, we're talking about Black and Latino voters. So there is now litigation, for example, in Texas around the new gerrymandered maps as being unconstitutional and discriminatory, because everybody should have the ability to have representation in this country. And so we have multiple constitutional and statutory protections in our country at the federal level to protect us from discrimination and to protect our voting process. So they're attacking it at all levels. And you're seeing Democrats try to respond, right? Next week in California, we'll have a ballot initiative to change redistricting in California. We need nonpartisan districting in this country. We are so far from that. We have a Republican operation that, in Steve Bannon's own words, is energized that they can win power without winning any more hearts and minds, that they can go down this path to gerrymander, to gut the Voting Rights Act, to gut Black political power and Latino political power in this country, to remake the census, and to redraw America in their image in a discriminatory fashion. So the 7 points you have up here are just the tip of the iceberg on kind of what we're seeing right now to kind of bully their way through this and to attack this problem from their point of view, that they don't have popular support to try to change the rules.
Also, very disturbingly, we sort of be seeing the emergence of these one-party states. Like all the red states are going to be just completely, you have to be Republican. It's just, that's the way it is. There's not going to be any room for Democrats in terms of electability.
It all boils down to fair representation. They know the only way that they can retain power is to weaken the power of Americans' votes. If the 26th election is fair, I think you're seeing poll after poll, day after day, you're seeing Republicans be booed in their own town halls in their districts. They know they're going to lose. That's why they're also trying to rebrand the big, beautiful bill. They had a meeting. The White House came down to Congress and said, we need to rebrand this bill. So just kind of looking at all the factors, it's very clear. It's not hidden. They know they'll lose. So they're trying to rig the rules to the game. And by doing so, they're essentially willing to gut fair representation, which is a core foundation that this country was built upon. No taxation without representation.
Yeah. Is there any chance that they might not succeed in actually converting all these seats? I mean, they're deeply unpopular now. I think I saw a poll today at 31%. Is there any chance that even this plan may not succeed?
Oh, I think this plan is not going to succeed in full.
Right.
This is a full frontal assault on multiracial democracy, and this is not going unchallenged currently today, right? We continue to have a Section 2 in effect, and that's why there was a recent voting rights hearing on Section 2. Today in Mississippi, there are state legislative elections going on because of a requirement to redraw maps there that will bring more Black representation to the state capital of Mississippi and break Republican supermajorities. This is not a short fight. This is a long fight. And these are long legal battles and lots of organizing to happen. And so this awareness raising that you're doing and that we're really encouraging people to do is that we have power in this and we cannot go into despair. We didn't create a voting rights and civil rights and women's rights movement out of nothing. That came out of incredible hardship, of a confederacy, of a lot of organizing and strife. And I think we are going to now live through and hopefully be part of creating a new path forward that we can't quite see yet for this multiracial democracy, as the institutions are just torn to shreds by the MAGA operation. We see people energized. I mean, down here on the ground, in terms of local races, there are more Democrats and Black Democrats that have voted in early voting in Georgia as a percentage in early vote to date. We're in the third week of early vote in the local elections in Georgia than we have seen in a decade.
Oh, wow.
In Louisiana earlier this year, Jeff Landry, our little mini Trump down in Louisiana, that governor, put a bunch of constitutional amendments on the ballot. Those got stomped out by a multiracial coalition by a 2-to-1 margin. You know, you can look at example after example of the pushback, not just on the ballot, but on issues. You know, Cleta Mitchell really wanted the SAVE Act. She tried to jam that through Congress. That has stalled, right? We are seeing that when people mobilize, when they push on their legislators, when they organize with their state officials, we can get wins. And sometimes wins look like delaying, and sometimes wins look like a bad thing not happening. This is a big, long fight, and the other side wants to overwhelm and distract. And that's what we are constantly up against. We cannot allow a one-party takeover of this to happen. And we're all fighting.
Tell me about this Section 2 thing. I mean, this Supreme Court is likely to strike down Section 2. It's obviously very, very depressing for any of us who've been supportive of democratic values and democratic rule of law here in America. And yet we're going to sort of see all expectations, if it's true, if they come true, a real wiping out of the Congressional Black Caucus and of equal representation and fair representation. Max, this is significant. And are we reading the tea leaves correctly? Are we sure? Are we likely to see the Supreme Court strike down Section 2?
Well, I think that's what legal experts who are court watchers are seeing, right? You have Clarence Thomas, who has made no secret over the years that he is no friend to the Voting Rights Act, and he considers remedying racial discrimination in maps as discrimination, which is kind of the central question before the court here. And Justice Kavanaugh has also echoed a different argument that Clarence Thomas has put forward, essentially saying that the power of the Voting Rights Act to remedy racial discrimination maps has like an end date, like it cannot be forever. And so that's what people think that these two justices they're going to approach this decision from.
And Lauren, this is from your perspective, especially with the work you've been doing at Fair Rights. This is a real hit to you. Do you think that the courts have do you think there's any way that these Supreme Court justices will be dissuaded by the time that they have to make this decision?
Look, I think we are likely going to face a situation that is confusing and muddled. I think it's very possible. It's very clear that the Federalist Society members on the court, the John Roberts Court, do not like Section 2 and do not like the Voting Rights Act, but the ways that they dislike it differ. And so our organization and our allies are bracing for a confusing decision that the justices can claim they didn't get Section 2, but they do, through a confusing ruling that leaves map makers in states kind of confused on what to do and leaves voters and advocates in a situation where we have to advocate without knowing what the rules are. And so we're expecting the unexpected. We're also expecting that we may get a very unclear decision, which means more long court battles, more organizing and communications work, and sort of a new era. There's different sort of precedent for this. You look at like the Brnovich decision out of the court having to do with the Voting Rights Act, which since there's been the Brnovich decision, we have won a lot less voting rights cases for the good guys in this country. And so I expect this is going to be a long battle. I think we're going to there's still not supposed to be racial discrimination in maps. That is part of the 14th Amendment. And so I think we're going to see a slew of different legal arguments. I think we're going to see an aggressive right-wing response. And I think we're going to be going into an area where every single outlet like yours and others, small, big, medium, are going to be really important to make sure voters stay focused on what kind of pushback we're going to need to do and organize. And it's going to look different, right? It's going to be a simple state legislative process in most states, right? And then there's going to be court battles, right? And so that means people need to get involved with their state legislative battles. They need to understand the connection that redistricting isn't this academic thing. This is about whether or not Donald Trump and his party get to pick your representation for school board, for county commission, for state rep, and for Congress. Do they just get to pick your representative? Because that's what the path would be going towards. And I think as we organize around this, then we can organize the biggest, most comprehensive response that helps shape a new world and inspires turnout, mobilization, and engagement like this country has never seen. I think this court is playing with fire. If they want to gut political power for Black Americans and Americans of color and their allies in the face of this MAGA onslaught, I think they are recklessly opening up a new chapter of history that ultimately will make them look awful, but will usher in a new era where we cannot fathom quite yet.
Just in terms of the math, and that's very well said. Thank you for saying that. The math could cost us 19 seats. It costs Democrats 19 seats. I mean, that is a staggering amount of gerrymandering going on that we've not seen before. What does that do to our chances really in next November? I mean, does it look to you like Democrats can still win?
So let's be clear. It is unlikely that there will be 19 new Republican districts on the map with candidates filed running next year. Even in the fastest Supreme Court gutting decision and the fastest gerrymandering in these states, with candidate filing deadlines and litigation and the rest, it is possible but unlikely that Republicans would gain that number of seats in time for 2026. So number one, first, we have to marshal all of our resources now on the pushback and organizing, on the delay and the speaking up, because at a bare minimum, we should be able to push this out till 2028 so that next year we can run on the current lines and push back against this onslaught with the power of Congress. So that's number one. Number two, 19 more Republican seats. That is awful for farmers. That is awful for educators. That is awful for families. That is a horrible outcome for all Americans, and we'll want to get the word out about that.
And the Democrat reaction here is obviously to do some of this in Democrat states. We'll see it in the California initiative. Is that happening in any other states that you are aware of? And what will that math look like?
I think we just heard Virginia is going to consider redrawing some maps. So that's definitely a positive reaction. And, we hope to see more states follow suit.
But you're aware of any others other than Virginia and California that are playing with this?
Just today, there was litigation filed in Staten Island and a congressional seat there. That is a just newly filed piece of litigation today, arguing that needs to be more representation for Staten Islanders of color. So that is impact litigation that's connected to this fight. I would expect to see more things like that. I know there are conversations going on in every single Democratic-controlled state about this issue, and I think the question is just going to be, what does it take to get them to act? We can obviously go through the whole list of blue states, and there are opportunities in many of them. But I think, look, our side of the aisle, we want fair maps. Yeah. Our leaders across our party have been advocating for fair maps. And leaders in our party have fallen down at times in states on Black representation in maps, right? So this is a complicated issue. This is not over. This is going to continue happening. And as we see more and more Republican overreach, I think you're going to see more and more Democratic response. And I think next week is going to be a big week with hopefully a positive outcome in California. And I think if we see the entire South go into a racist gerrymandering process in the first quarter of next year, I think that is going to change the conversation dramatically with everybody in a position of power to influence this fight, from Congress to state leaders. And so I think the next 6 months are going to be really fraught and really active as we go into the 2026 cycle.
I know we're a little running out of time here, but just a couple more questions if I could. Max, the Heather Honey phenomenon is quite stunning. I mean, this is a woman who was part of the Cyber Ninjas Arizona effort, the incredibly stupid attempt to overturn that result. But it also emerged that she was, as we saw in the intro there, just completely, she's not qualified. She's not even capable of doing any of the stuff that she claims to be doing. And then she's also selling all these conspiracy theories and complete falsehoods. And yet here she is in charge of our election security at DHS. Is this really an impactful thing? And then can you describe to us what the New York Times says was a real plot to create a national federal emergency in order to take over the state laws and state regulations running elections?
Yeah, so let's start with the first question. You're asking, is this a serious threat, essentially? It is. These aren't just a random slew of conspiracy theories. These are trained partisan operatives who have been working together now for several years under a well-funded, well-organized sort of apparatus. The Election Integrity Network is sort of like the biggest threat to fair elections that everyone is sleeping on. They are not whack jobs. They are not simple crackpots. They are people with means and with connections to get those means into action. So they shouldn't be dismissed as a not serious threat. In addition to the federal government, they are being installed in local government in critical roles as well. Right here in Georgia in Fulton County, there's a legal battle playing out where the Republican Party of Fulton County and the Georgia Republican Party, backed by the RNC, is trying to force the Fulton County Board of County Commissioners to accept 2 Election Integrity Network operatives as appointees on their local elections board. Now, these are folks who have well-documented history of trying to mess with independent and fair elections. They advance false claims. They have gone so far as to suggest that the DOJ come and investigate Fulton County, and they're ready to help. So these are bad faith actors that are being installed at multiple levels of government. And Fulton County in particular, it is the largest, most Democratic and blackest county in Georgia, which is a critical battleground state. It has a big U.S. Senate race coming up. So these folks should not be dismissed. People need to be watching what they're doing and sharing information about it.
But just to underline, and what they're planning to do is declare a national emergency, based on not winning the 2020 elections. I mean, this is kind of nuttiness on its face, but it's still something they're going to try and do. What does that look like if there's a national emergency that forces states to do what? Are they going to give up running those elections? Are going to be, what happens to those elections? And not that we know, but I mean, what do you suspect might happen? And what does that actually mean to our democracy if this actually goes through? I mean, this is a really serious threat.
Go ahead.
Well, to echo your earlier point, Max, they cannot take over state elections.
Right.
There is no national emergency power that allows them to take over elections. All the work of the Election Integrity Network at all levels is meant to create a pretense for Trump to be able to create this so-called emergency and then test the aggressiveness of his operation to try to get done the election changes that they want. So just like every executive order out of that White House, Max and I don't call them EOs, we call them angry press releases. They are largely illegal and or unconstitutional communications missives meant to drive the narrative and to get as many people at the national, state, and local level to make the changes that they are mandating, to the point where they will threaten federal funding if you do not do this. They will threaten your FEMA funding. They will threaten...
Today, they've threatened not to... I think he said that he was not going to give blue states FEMA funding.
Correct.
Crazy.
So they're willing to hold us all hostage to their demands on a series of ways for these illegal orders. But look, elections are run locally. And so if you want to be part of fighting this, become a poll worker. That might sound so simplistic, but it's literally at the level that we have to understand our democracy is a small d, and we all have to participate in it. It cannot just be Cleta Mitchell's Election Integrity Network activists populating our poll workers and our local election administrators, because they will try to implement whatever is in any sort of ridiculous, illegal, angry press release from the president. So I think that's the challenge. I think there's a whole lot of speculation we could do about what could be in this emergency, but we're not going to do that fear-mongering. What we want people to understand is that this is a serious threat. They're installing conspiracy theorists and bad faith actors up and down our government and in our election administration roles, as they're doing in every other part of our society. But that doesn't mean at the end of the day that they're going to control everything. And we do have a lot of power to push back. So look, he made Antifa a terrorist organization. It's not an organization, it's an idea. This man will go and do and say anything he thinks will advance his agenda to shape a narrative, to sort of shift the Overton window to get it normalized, and then to try to get as many state-level sycophants and patsies to just implement it. And our collective mission is to find our power on our own, but in collective action and non-compliance, which is what we have to scale in 2026.
And everyone really needs to get involved if they can. One final question here about the Dominion voting machines. I mean, this to me strikes me as the most disturbing of these developments, and what would right be the biggest threat is that Scott Leindecker, as a former Republican elections director in St. Louis, is now basically owning the Dominion voting machines, which back a few years ago was the reason we had that huge settlement from Fox. And now the Republicans basically own the system, or own that part of the voting machine system. How can we be sure, knowing everything we suspected happened in 24, that this won't be another rigged affair?
You want to take it, Max, or would you like me to chime in?
Sure. I think it's too early to tell at this point. We don't know a lot. There's not a ton of details out there yet. I would not want to jump to any conclusions and kind of put conspiracy theories out there. I would say the best thing, the most responsible thing to do is wait and see as more details and more information become available. That's kind of all we can do right now.
A lot of people are frustrated with the Democratic Party right now. You hear it and you see it everywhere, and maybe some of it is disinformation, but certainly some very legitimate voices out there are saying that not enough is being done. Do you guys think enough is being done?
we are under an autocratic onslaught on all levels. There is so much more everybody should and could be doing. And so I think it's on our collective effort. It's not just on one political party. We're in a two-party system. And at this point, we have a autocratic party and an anti-autocratic party. And so that is a ton of pressure on the Democratic Party, who's trying to figure this out. So of course, I want them to be doing more. And civil society has to do more. Corporate America needs to be doing more. Higher ed needs to be doing more. We need to see less capitulation and more speaking out. And so I think that's across our entire civil society. That's what we're looking for. And that's where Fair Fight, we hope to be transparent and clear leaders in this space to speak truth to power in a way and to build coalitions both behind the scenes and publicly. Because to beat back this threat, we cannot just be in a partisan fight. We have to build a very, very broad coalition across ideology, across race, gender, across citizenship, and the rest. The kind of coalition it takes to beat back a threat like this is way beyond one that is partisan. And so the partisan actors need to do more and better, and all the nonpartisan actors and parts of our society need to step up. And so
Everybody.
reminding, exactly, as we go into next year, we've seen so much capitulation, and that's going to need to stop. And we need more bold leaders speaking out.
The key really is just we need to protect the independence, the fairness of the 26th election. If Democrats can retake the House, if they could potentially retake the Senate, there's essentially a foothold to push back against military overreach, ICE weaponization, abuses of power left and right. So it really boils down to protecting the fairness of the election.
Yeah, that's a good point. Tell everyone how they can help support your fight at Fair Fight. How can they join? How can they help your organization do what you're doing? And anything else you'd like to promote? Lauren, why don't you go ahead?
That's great. Thank you, Zev. So if you go to fairfight.com, you can sign up to volunteer, you can sign up to donate, you can get linked up with our Substack. And we do regular posting on our Substack about all these key issues, and we highlight really important stories in the media, like the New York Times stories of. And so that's really the good portal to us. And then we obviously are on Twitter and Blue Sky and all the social platforms to follow along. And we need everybody to sign up and get involved. And we're really grateful for the opportunity to speak with you tonight.
Thank you very much for being here, both of you. I really appreciate your times. Lauren Groh-Wargo and Max Flugrath from Fair Fight Action. Fairfightaction.com is where you can find them and join them and support them in their fight. This is, as you just said, a fight that we all need to start looking at as our own personal fights. This is no longer a battle of one party versus the other. And this is going to be taken an all-America effort, a real nonpartisan effort to show up with clear demands and make sure that our demands are met each step of the way, because every single day we need to be out there. As far as I'm concerned, it's going to be a very, very complicated fight all the way up till next election and beyond, and then take every step possible in order to fight this autocratic rule that's come to America and is really trying to steal our democracy. That is Narativ Live for tonight. Thank you both for joining us, and thank you at home for being here. I'll be back tomorrow at 3:00 for the 5 Stack with Dean Blundell. We'll see you then. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
One day, you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narativ, where truth lives.